Which Anna Mikan Gijabina. Welcome back. So as Travis says, we'll finish up. There's two more teachings, important teachings. I know maybe everybody's getting burnt out about the 7 teachings, but perhaps it's the cold. So what's our first one here? Okay. Oh yeah. No, that's
You want to go to the new one?
Okay. Yeah. So I got a different mic. I don't have to stay in one place. I can bounce around. See that? Yeah. The end is to win. This is probably the hardest one for people to comprehend of the teachings. I think, in my experience, when people don't think about humility, what it all means, and sometimes it can be the toughest for people. Now, if we're going back to the very first part of the creation story, where Anishinaabe had visited with Ma Ingan, and they had named all the creation, and he fell prone in front of the Creator, and he said, "Ah, Sama," and he gifted that. Here, I'm giving you this, and of course, that's the name for our sacred tobacco. And but it doesn't actually mean tobacco. It means I'm giving this to you, and that's the word we use. So like most of the words in our language, it's a verb base. So I'm giving this to you. He was very humble. So we have to really understand this concept because of humility, because to be submissive or compliant, to know, to listen and learn from a greater authority is hard for people sometimes. And when I'm talking about a greater authority, it could be, in this case, I guess it's the Creator. So even though we are part of all the creation, of course, that Great Spirit is, He wants us to learn. He wants us to behave in a certain way, to be submissive. So there's many synonyms for being submissive: to be meekly, to be passive, to be obedient, yielding, compliant, non-resistant, timid, patient. And so I have my oldest son, he's so energetic. It's just hard for him really just to be a good listener. I kind of always believed he has ADHD. He can't sit in one place too long, and he's just, well, we have to listen to the quietness sometimes. So to be subjective, to gain greater understanding of self and a deeper awareness of your actions have on nature and the greater community outside ourselves. So people are starting to understand the impact we have on the world around us right now because of the climate change. We're trying, they're seeing that. I had a chance when I was in Billings here last week that, you know, we, as human beings, we just a lot of times focus on ourselves, and we need to focus on ourselves. And the 7 teachings are all about that. You know, it's probably, I think, is one of the greatest gifts the Creator gave us. And that we need to stay focused, but we're all interconnected to the sacredness of the world. Everything, every part of creation is connected. We're tied in to everything. For better or for worse, we're tied in. So every emotion we express, we sometimes see it on people's face. Sometimes that emotion, we impact nature about other living things like animals. Certainly animals can detect that emotion about us, that sometimes we are good at hiding our emotions, but animals can sense it. I've even heard that like, you know, our animush, our dogs, our bijous, our cats, they can even detect sickness in our bodies. I've heard that. Have you heard that? Yeah, they can detect that sickness in it. So if it goes unchecked long enough, it actually infects us. We get sick. And sometimes that sickness infects others. I think the way the world is going, a lot of people are getting sick. There's new diseases like this COVID came, and it's still here, it's here to stay. And we still don't understand quite where it came from. And so so I think this was kind of known here some time ago, that there was going to be a time coming in the future, and we'll talk about that when these prophecies that was prophesied, that there will be sickness, unknown things that come to our people. And so who would have known 400 or 500 years ago that our people would have been infected to the point where the greater extermination of our people was by sickness that we weren't resistant to when the first Europeans came. And how just when they finally reached the interior of this country, that they found nothing but death. I think about the story of Hernando Cortez, who finally was looking for gold, and he started in the southern part of this country, around the central part, and he made his way north. Well, that must have been great news to many of the tribal people living in different parts of that region, that they would send runners, and that the initial runner had gained contact from Cortez. And also from the animals he brought. He brought sheep, he brought pigs, he brought cattle, he brought horses, and just even those animals themselves because of the waste of the animals, it affected the land. And different things came. We see that in modern day from fish that are coming from different other places. These fish have, they're not native to this country. Different grasses, different shrubs are impacting the agricultural part of the United States. Certain things you can't take across the border. Agricultural products, our borders were closed off when people were sick. All of that, it's all interconnected, whether it's human beings, it's animals, the sickness they have, and everything else. I read a study here a couple of years ago about bison. They had thought that the bison way up in Canada that were taken from the original herds in Yellowstone, not Yellowstone, but yeah, Yellowstone Park area. And they were taken up into Canada, but it wasn't very long, within a generation. Now all the bison have that bovine blood type in them. There's not really any pure bison left. So, and that's the way things. They say that also in our prophecies too. You'll be hearing more about that, that at the coming of the new race, the Europeans, that out of that in several hundred years, that out of that, those two groups coming together, that there would be a new race evolving out of that. And of course, pretty much a lot of people are mixed blood today. Even those who profess to be pure blood, a lot of them aren't. In fact, that's not a bad thing. That's not a, that's not a bad thing. So we have to be submissive to what is happening to us. And some of these things we don't necessarily agree with when it comes to our own authority as human beings. We're not necessarily agree with everything, but we have to be aware and sometimes accept the inevitability of what's happening to us. And so a lot of times it's from a higher power, just the way it is. It's so you have to start gaining a greater understanding and looking at things from a farther distance. To be patient, to understand the interconnectedness and sacredness of self. So basically, evolution of man, the world, it's all meant to be. It's all meant to be. Light can't stay in one place. It travels out. And light overtakes the darkness. But still, it's sacred. Okay? To be passive and non-resistant to knowledge and positive ways that will allow greater insight into the sacredness of creation and your particular understanding of it. So we still have people that are afraid to take the COVID shot. We seen that here last week, and didn't allow their children to take it. Yet one of the women that were here, she said she never took the COVID shot, but her parents got sick, her brothers and sisters got sick, but somehow they didn't get sick because they said, well, that's because I didn't take the COVID shot. Well, You know, that's good. She didn't. But who's to say that she won't ever not get sick? So we have to understand the connectedness. We have to be more submissive and compliant. And these kind of words, among some people, that means that we are kind of weak sometimes. We have this teachings of being weak. But if you connect all these other important words, like to a greater authority, for a greater understanding of self, or a deeper awareness of your actions, the greater community, understanding their interconnectedness and sacredness of things, knowledge, having knowledge in itself is leads to a lot of greater understanding of how to change your behavior. Okay. So personally, myself, when I was younger, I wasn't really happy with the way things were going for myself and how my actions were putting people off, sometimes the ones that I loved. And so I wanted to change for the better. I wanted a better understanding, but in order to reach that understanding, I had to get the help of a greater authority. And that was hard to do. So I think anytime you work on yourself, that's going to be very hard. It's easy to look at other people and tell them what they need to change or what they need to do to change, or offer that advice. And but sometimes that just falls upon, you know. So what does it take for us to change? How do we become good people? A better person of ourselves. How do we do that? That's really hard. Yeah, that's a question.
Seems to me that my experience kind of have to, life goes through some.
No, go ahead. She's our helper.
Oh, well, I speak. I think Ruben used to always say, "I'll be enlightened." Kind of follow into that. He used to always say that. Anyway, speaking from my experience, I think a person has to go through growing pains through life. And
explain that. Growing pains.
Growing pains, what I mean, as you're growing, you're learning. And, you're learning about yourself, you're learning about other people. If you're a different culture, you're learning, if you're tribal or non-tribal and how you fit into the dominant society. And maybe if you're traditional or non-traditional, or was raised, Christian or raised non-Christian, so you go through some trials and tribulations and experiences that you kind of have to go through. I think everybody has to go through those type of things. And then you start to understand inward about who you are, and identify some of the things that may have triggered some problems that you had in life. And then you start to identify those and then wanting to become a better person. And part of that is knowing where you come from, to understand where you are, and then to understand where you're going. And that was a big part of my journey, but I think that's a big part of it, in my opinion.
So it's a willingness. It's saying it's a willingness to learn.
Yeah, willingness to understand, where you're at and your
Mhm.
faults and how you fit in with other people and society, and, understanding that, and then wanting to improve things, not only for yourself, but your family and friends, and, your place in society. But,
Mhm.
I think is part of it. And I think a lot of people probably go through some of that as they grow and become older.
Okay. I believe you're right. That was my case. I was willing to do anything at that time because not only was I hurting other people, uh, and but I was lacking the understanding how to do that. I didn't understand how I could make that change, and or what it would take. It seemed too hard. It seemed too far beyond me to make that change. How does this happen? How does this happen? I grappled with that question for a long time. And I remember praying about it to a higher power. I didn't exactly know what that higher power was then, but I did understand that things had happened to me that was out of my control. And I did a fundamental thing all the time that basically all people do is I blamed others for the way I was. That state of mind, that state of behavior, I blamed. So yeah, she wants to talk. Oh,
I guess for me, when I was growing up, because I grew up in some rough grounds too. But what really helped me try to get through it was having a lot of empathy. Understanding that a lot of people's actions aren't direct, they're not trying to do it directly towards me. Trying to understand where they come from. That way I have an open mind to where I don't have that closed door on people. Because everybody's going through things. So that's what really saved me as a kid. Is always keeping that empathy and understand that everybody has issues and we're all human.
yeah. You know, it's today when I think back about that, it's almost miraculous how people come into your lives. Some are complete strangers, or you reflect back and you think about the only ones that were really empathetic towards you. Maybe they were there themselves in that position, or they had a higher understanding of your condition. I think about there was a few counselors in my school. Maybe some of your friends were more patient than others, things like that. I know the turning point for me was the elders. They were talking about stuff that I could relate to, not necessarily in a traditional setting, but they themselves had been subject to the trauma. But my trauma was just one small piece of it in a greater thing that was happening to me only as an individual, but it was something that happened to all our people. And they kind of explained it in a way where I could understand that. But it always came back to my identity of who I was as an individual of a larger group, And I think for us Native people, I think that's something we always long for, especially the little shell, and of course, people back home. When I look at other tribal peoples and talk to other tribal peoples, that whole concept of one of the most important things that's so important in our lives is family, of community, of belonging to something that we've all shared, that we share every day, that familiarity. I may not know your name, but me and you are on the same level. I'm no better than you. And so what I had to learn later on is the connectedness and the sacredness of how we're connected to all other things. What we say, what we do, what motivates us in our actions is really having to do with humility. Din Dizwin. And it said that Anishinaabe, when we talked about that, the first man, he fell before the Creator, and the Creator acknowledged him. That in that teaching, in our prayers and our petitions to the Creator, without this humility, we can't feel the presence of the Creator. But the Creator understands sometimes, like in children, they lack an understanding of things just because of their age. But perhaps, it's because of the trauma they themselves are undergoing in their own lives. So if we can go away from tonight with this, a greater understanding, a willingness to be submissive to a greater learning, to a greater understanding that can only come from the Creator. So then we can really, knowing that and understand that, when we think about it, you're going to pray, you're going to make a petition, that when we put our tobacco down or something, we have this confidence, we have this belief that the Creator really hears us, or they're going to really do something. Okay. Any more questions? Anybody online? What's that? Okay. Well, let's go to the next one. Any more questions here or comments?
There's so many people in the world that don't understand humility because they're taught superiority. And I think it's only through living through those situations where we are humble, where our place is humble, that we actually can understand humility. And I think the hard thing in the world, my full-blood daughter and I had with each other, was I was able to see when she wasn't accepted in places that we were together. And
when I was the only one that was different in other places where she was fully
Mhm.
accepted. And we developed humor, and we developed a deeper understanding of tolerance.
Mhm.
But that's really rare in some people's lives, that they live in their own worlds and they don't give themselves a chance to go over to the other, whether they're Chinese or Japanese or native. They're not exposing themselves to those other ideas. And if they go over there to that place, they're judging that the other, instead of saying, what are the reasons that they are that way? And what is the gift that opportunity they're in? What is the gift of that? And the gift is more understanding in the world. And the gift is humility. I don't know that. I just don't know about that, why they do it that way, instead of judging.
Most people, I'd say a lot of people, say, you know, I don't know, I didn't know. And we can say, well, that, you know, there's that word ignorance, but, you know, sometimes ignorance presents an opportunity, for us to know. You know, I've heard many times that the creator doesn't see color. Or, you know, a mother, a grandmother, a father, or a grandfather doesn't see with looking through the eyes of love at his children. His grandchildren do not see the imperfections of their children and grandchildren. Or shouldn't. Although they display them. But then again, we sometimes when we say, oh yes, we do, we see the imperfections of our children or our grandchildren, but we're human beings. We're not supposed to be perfect. And no matter how old you are, you'll probably never reach perfection and be a perfect person. I don't believe there is a perfect person ever. So I think our misunderstanding of situations or not knowing presents itself to know, to challenge us, to know more, to create that understanding. Yeah. Okay, let's go on to the last one. So the animal that, or the little furry brother that we have, that's a Mick. A Mick. And why did the old ones choose a Mick? What does a Mick do? What does he do? Or she does? Huh? Huh?
Do dams on the river.
They dam up a river? Is that a good thing? They stop the water from flowing, or most of it? Yeah, I think it's good. It creates places that don't run dry, where all the water will run out, especially in the smaller creeks. We have a creek near the west side of our land, and it comes down from the lakes up north, and when was it? Just last year, we walked down there, I and my two sons, and I couldn't believe how tall that thing was. Last time I'd been there, maybe it was only about this high, but this thing was over 8 feet tall. It must have been 9 or 10 feet tall, this dam. It was huge. It was huge. But you could see all the tracks of all these different animals coming down there to water. And there was grass growing on the outside. It just offered different. So this one knows something that about the water that others don't. Okay. And this will be one of the teachings about Amik for the women when they learn about water, some of the things about water. So life has many paths and roads. They all have a beginning, they all have an end. We all must stop once in a while to reflect and question if the path is the right one that you're on. How many people have you've heard says, I got to slow down in my life, you know? I got to start doing some of the things I really need to do. I need to spend more time with my kids. I need to spend more time with my parents, or spend more time with my wife or my husband. Did your mom ever say that to you? I need to spend more time. Did she? Awesome. Yeah. Did your dad say that to you? Need to spend more time with my girls. He never says that. Oh, okay. All right, let's go to the next slide. And walk in. And walk in. Understanding what is good and bad many times requires experience. So that goes back to the first one. So what do we have to do to know that what we're doing is good or bad? To really understand what we're doing. Is it a good thing or is it a bad thing? Or do you just know that? When do you know when you're doing good? Do you know when you're doing bad? You don't? Huh? How do you know? Do you know you're doing bad though? Sometimes? Okay. When we're young, sometimes I believe everybody innately knows, even when you're a child, that if you're doing something bad. So how did children learn a long time ago? How do they learn today? Yeah. So kids didn't have schools a long time ago. So what were they encouraged to do? Play games? And what else besides having so much fun? So the girls were encouraged to help their mothers, help their older sisters, help their grandmas. And if they were good mothers and good grandmothers, they would teach them, guide them what needs to be done for yourselves. Teach you how to wash your face and comb your hair and You know, change your clothes once in a while. Or every day. Okay?
Every day, young grass or their hands in the water. They didn't learn reading of words. They learned nature's ways.
All right.
And there were lessons in the animals and the trees and when the berries were on the bushes and to read how other people were feeling. And it's a skill we don't teach our children. Well, look, he's not feeling well today.
Mhm.
You know? So everything that they read was from the world around them.
And you're right. I was going to bring something up about that. That's correct. So nature was a great teacher of ours long time ago. And they used to get the kids up so early, right before it was light out, and they'd make them stand out, get dressed, wash your face. And I've heard that from all kinds of different tribes, that they'd stand and wait for the sun to come up and face the east, wherever that is. Is it this way? Yeah, and wait and ask them to listen as it came up. And as soon as the sun started coming up, what would you hear? The birds. Exactly. Yeah, you'd hear life starting to come alive. And even if we weren't there, the birds still would be, calling out, saying, I'm here, I see you, I hear you. So if you look at nature, mothers would groom their young, the fathers and mothers would take care, feed, and make a nest, all of that. Some of the animals in their world, they're like human beings. They mate for life, their families, they stay with their families forever. And I have some stories about that you'll be hearing. So when we're doing something, and if we don't do it right, then we usually hear about it. From our mother, from somebody, from your sister. And there's always those encouraging words that if you're not doing something right, doing something wrong, and we should always hear the good things too. So understanding comes about with empathy, with love, encouragement. If that child does not, or that person does not get raised like that, then their ears get closed to that understanding. So children have to be encouraged. They have to be loved. Empathy when they don't do something right, instead of scorning them, shaming them, being overbearing or too overbearing. A lot of times that child will close themselves off to that kind of intensity, and they're apt to make those mistakes again. So through experience, we learn. We gain wisdom that way. Wisdom does not always come with age. Listening and practice skills. Being a good listener and practicing be a good listener. That's how you become wise. Yeah. That's how you become good at what you're doing, is listening. It's one of the most important things. Ever wonder why a lot of times people don't listen? Maybe they don't want to listen to what they're hearing. I heard a older couple today, and she told him, he never listens to me. He never hears what I'm saying. Yes, I do, but I don't like the way you're saying it to me. Selective hearing. So a lot of times it's just how we approach. You know, being a good listener, and practicing those skills. Wisdom is something down the path less traveled. So gaining wisdom, people who gain wisdom is doing something most people don't usually do. Sometimes it's harder. Learning something and benefiting from it, like any other skill, takes practice. Masters of their craft are willing to be patient at it, to undergo maybe additional hardships to get it right so it becomes automatic in themselves. And that can be anything from being a good carpenter to be a good electrician to everything. Human beings have a way that they like to kind of take a shortcut. So when I was younger, I used to see these old people always wearing moccasins, and I was given a set of moccasins. I thought, man, these are so cool, they're so comfortable. I wonder how you get that leather, make that leather. And so I found an old lady who made that leather, and I went there, and she was older, and I asked her if I could help her, if she would teach me how to do that. And so after I had learned the process, I realized that she gave me the hardest part of the process. But I found out why it was so necessary, the hardest part of that process, because if that wasn't done right, none of the other processes, the end of it, it wouldn't work. You'd have to come back to that first process and do it right. It was so important. So after I had gotten married, and my wife, she learned how to do beadwork from the age of 6 and became very good at it, that she actually realized that she could get money from that. So her parents started selling that for her, and she always had money. And so, but the leather was always expensive. And so I taught her how to make leather, and I had become very good at it, and we made our own leather. And it just improved what we were doing. Well, my father-in-law, he never learned that. And one day he was given a buffalo hide, and he wanted to make it into a buffalo robe like that one there, nice and soft and pliable, and and I told him, well, we got to do this. Oh, he said, that's going to take too long. And he was an older guy, right? I said, well, that's just the process. You got to clean all that flesh and fat off, and it's all that membrane has to be taken off meticulously. And if that membrane is not on the hide, then all that liquid from inside the body, the juices, the blood would penetrate to the hide. I said, I'll find a different way. Well, I could help you. Of course, he was kind of proud. He said, no. I said, I'll fix it. So the next day we went up to see him. And there he was driving his little tiny Toyota truck. And here behind him was my brother-in-law. He was riding on top of this buffalo hide, right? The hair up. And he was pulling that hide from a rope. And here he come down from where he lived. He lived about a half a mile off the road. He had been dragging him on this hide, right? we were, what the heck, you know? And he turned around on the pave like that, and Rick was holding on to it, and he took off back up towards his place, and we were following him, and we didn't know what the heck was going on. And so he got back up there. Rick jumped up. Oh, and here part of his jean was all ripped on one side of his cheek. And there was a big hole in the hide. I said, what are you doing? Well, Dad said, we can clean this hide off with something on it. It's hard. It'll just peel it off. Oh, I just laughed about that night, you know. But, well, I guess that didn't work, he said. So sometimes taking the hard path is not necessarily the hard path, but the correct path. And we don't see it right away, but sometimes by taking a shorter path, we find out real quickly, no, this isn't the right way. And so he just was going to throw that hide away. I said, well, I'll take it. I ended up really fixing it up, getting it nice and soft. And I took off actually one of the back legs and I patched that hole, and I gave it to him. So he appreciated that. But to me, it was just too much work. He called it woman's work. I said, not necessarily. I said, yeah, any kind of hard job was woman's work. Yeah. So, wisdom is an awakening of life. Awakening to life. My youngest boy, he just got out of prison not too long ago. Spent, he's not very old. He went to federal prison when he was just turned 18. And he'd get out. He'd violate his probation, go back in, back again, get out, back again. He did that for over 20 years. Just crazy little stuff. You know, he'd go back in. He went to all the big maximum federal prisons in the country and that. And here he just got out here, I believe, in, oh, the summer, I believe in August. But he always used to tell me, yeah, and I talked to him. I talked to him about his life, try to get him to talk about different things about his life, his thinking, his behavior, everything. And his response to me was, yeah, I know, Dad. Yeah, I know, Dad. I know, Dad. Yeah, I know. Well, apparently he didn't know. Because he'd eventually go back. I knew there would be a day, but I was kind of losing some hope. And But then I realized, you know, the Creator's got to take care of this himself for him. So the last time he came out, I said, John, are you ready to stay out? He said, yeah. And I started talking to him again. He said, Dad, I understand. I understand now. I understand what you were telling me about all this stuff. And he's really changed. It was like an awakening. He said, one day he said, I seen what was going on. It was just clear to me. The way I was thinking was affecting the way my behavior was. Something simple like that. He said, something went off in my head. He just like a light bulb. He said, suddenly, he said, I understood what you were saying. I can't be around people that do drugs and drink. I can't be around people who violate the law all the time, get in trouble, he said. That's not cool. He said, because I have to have my own rules for myself. There was a time when he was in prison, I got a package from him, a big envelope, and here it was. He had actually took this course and became a minister. And he thought that would help him when his parole hearing would come up. Well, it didn't. It was just one of the cons that they do. But he said it was awakening to me. Everything, it just was so simple. So like black and white, he said. So when wisdom comes, something that's so simple, that's so difficult for some people, it's like a light bulb goes off. Some people just don't get it, while others get it. Wisdom always has a following. Observing trouble is better than being in trouble. When I made that one up, I was thinking of my son. I said, it's better to watch it, learn by observing, than to be there. Yeah.
So I would always do that way I would stay out of trouble. Well, my younger brother, he was pretty wild and he would show up with all these crazy things all the time. And he showed up with a dirt bike and I was like, where'd you get this at? And he's like, oh, I just borrowed from my grandpa. Do you want to go for a ride? And I was like, okay. I was like, show me what I need to do. Like, where's the gas and that? Oh, you just go. And I'm like, no, I don't just go. I was like, didn't you just run into a tree the other day? It's like, yeah, but that's how you learn.
That's how you learn, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, so wisdom doesn't always come with age, get older. I don't exactly believe that. I mean, only because of the length of time we've lived, we've made more mistakes and eventually we get it. But I know plenty of people, especially back home, that they're older and they haven't learned. So wisdom can come at any age. Many times it comes through experience, but a willingness to really look and reflect on what you're doing. You know, so yeah. Any more anything else? Okay, I'm going to give you a preview about these 7 fires prophecy. It'll kind of ground us back where we were. So the coming of the 7 teachings happens before this. Okay. One of the other things that will be discussed, but that'll be discussed in the next series when we talk about the 4 seasons, living within the 4 seasons. We will talk about ceremony, where they originated, what kind of ceremonies the Anishinaabe had and why we had them, and what they mean for the individual, the family, and the group. Every aspect of them. Participation, doing them. How does one acquire to be able to do those ceremonies, all that stuff. But the 7th prophecy places us on the eastern seaboard. A lot of people don't realize that our people, by and large, we all were gathered out in the area of northeast part of New York, where New York is, up by Maine, New Hampshire, on the actual eastern seaboard. Okay. It's where our people started what they call a migration, where the people migrated. So the importance of learning the 7 teachings, also keep in mind that not all the people listened to the prophecies, even though those affirmations were right in front of them. So powerful, so large that still people didn't listen. And those people that stayed are no longer here, just their nation name. Okay. But by and large, the people obeyed and they listened to these spirits, these 7 fires, and they followed what they were told to do. And because of that, they found a new homeland. It's an incredible story. It's told in the ancient ceremony of the Medewan, and their songs, their stories of the Medewan are filled with the 7 stopping places they made along the way. And it took the people literally anywhere from 1,000 years to almost 1,800 years to fulfill and finally come to that place where they were going to stop. Okay. And it's almost supernatural in a way, because these 7 spirits, or these 7 fires, actually emerged out of the water as fires, but they actually grew in time till they were tall, where people could see them as pillars of fires. Actually 8 pillars of fires. And it's called the 7 prophecy, 7 fires, because in one of the prophecies, 2 of them speaks about one of the prophecies. So 2 together. But there was 8 pillars of fires. And eventually, after a huge amount of the people came to look at this spectacle, they actually started moving inland from the water, from the Atlantic. They moved in. And it said that once the pillar of fire touched the shore, the fire went away, and there stood somewhat of a human looking person. Okay. So it's There'll only be 2 sessions of that, because I can't go through all of them in one. But it tells what's gonna happen, told what was gonna happen to our people. And everything we can think about what's happened in the past, especially since the Europeans came, has happened, is part of the prophecy. But even more. And there's still more that's gonna happen in the future that talks about, so. You can read about some of this. I think it's online, I believe. But there's more to it. There's more to it, so. Yeah. So that'll be interesting. If you want to hear more about that, of course, 10. Yeah. And then what about that feast we're gonna have? When is that? This month, is it the 15th? We're gonna have a feast at the office building, the program building, I think on the 15th. I think it's from 12 to 1, and we're gonna have a feast to Nanabuju. And so that we can start doing the storytellings. Honoring him and his brother called Daiba Jamad. Is an old word for an old story. Or an ancient story, so. 12 to 1. But yeah, everybody's welcome to come to that too. So it'll be a potluck kind of thing. But if you don't bring any food, that's okay too. Yeah.
Sorry.
Bring yourself.
No.
Any kind of food? Any kind of food. So what we're going to do is we're going to make a spirit plate, take a little bit of food out of each of the food that people bring. Little bit, we'll put it in a cup or container with a little bit of tobacco, and then we'll smudge. Then we'll say the prayer, and I'll talk to the spirit of Nanabuju to allow us to tell the stories. By then we should have more snowfall. That's one of the things we do back home. That's a very old Anishinaabe way to ask the spirit first for permission to tell the stories of the people. So, an actual storytelling form, so. Yeah. Yeah, so you can bring anything. I mean, doesn't have to be anything spendy, it just could be a cupcake or two. Yeah. Yeah, it's during the week. I think it's on a Tuesday. It's on a Tuesday, right? Yeah, anything. You're not going to offer any of your candy? You're going to be stingy with your candy? You don't even give any to grandma? What? Well, that's all I got for tonight to finish this now, so.
So we're gonna end a little early today. I appreciate everyone for coming out, everyone online. Please drive safe and stay
Yeah.
warm. It's cold out there
But,
today.
Yeah, and we'll be having what's in the near future is before the Christmas break, and I believe that's going to be on the 7th of December. We're going to have a trade dance. Yeah. And we're going to have one every month throughout the winter. There'll be 3 of them. And so also we're going to have a New Year's Eve sobriety wellness powwow here, right here at the building. We might have a drum or two, but we'll have a bunch of food And Travis would be doing a little presentation along with Calvin. Singing and dancing, just getting together as a community, as a family, having some fun, celebrating sobriety and goodwill. Yeah. Okay. That's all I got. Well, miigwech for coming. Huh?